Hello and welcome to the MMQB NFL podcast. I'm Conor Orr. Albert Breer is here. Hopefully, I didn't get Wally pipped last week when I was forced out of my home by a very nice group of construction
Yeah, can we
people.
get an update?
So
Like, how's it going?
it's going. I'll text you a picture. I mean, I stood. So we don't have we're living in our basement now. We can come back into half of the house. So
Yep.
our basement is just like three of our mattresses pushed together and like all the kids' toys and like, everything like that.
So
And
everyone's in the basement then.
yeah,
We
we it's
we
like
we actually just went through something pretty similar to this.
yeah, it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when like all the entire family is like sleeping in a giant bed together. So
Yep.
but I stood and watched all the games. So like I stood from like I don't know whatever time we got home
I
from church
I
for
actually like doing that. Like
standing and
like
watching the games.
that like so because I'm old now, like sometimes I like almost feel myself nodding off like late on a Monday night game or a Sunday night game or whatever it might be, right? Thursday night game. And I really have to do it on Thursday night because I gotta be on after. But it like I feel like when I stand up and just the act of standing gives me energy now, which must mean I'm like 100 years old, right? But just like the act of being on my feet actually helps.
Yeah.
Are you there yet?
Uh so I feel like
Because
crap when I sit.
as has been well documented, you're significantly younger than me.
I feel bad when I sit, but I'm also I'm also an injured runner, and so I'm in a weird space right now where
Hmm.
normally like I will get up and just like run 5 miles, and then I'm like, that's my standing for the day. Like I did my standing,
Yeah.
and now I don't need to do it. But on Sundays now, like that I'm like, doing rehab and trying to recover and stuff like that. I would say that the standing was actually kind of nice, but also just weird to be watching an NFL game in a completely empty room with just like my laptop. But it was good. We're good. Everything's great. And we're gonna have like furniture next week. It's gonna be very exciting. So,
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, ours
um,
was like more of like an 8 month project, which was interesting. And I am married to the daughter of a fire chief who, I don't know if you know this, Connor, but you're not allowed to classify in your house. I don't know if it's state law or federal law or whatever, but you're not allowed to classify a room in your basement as a bedroom, unless there is a direct exit from there because of fire laws. And so
hmm.
the idea of going to the basement was a non-starter for her and her mom. So we had to shuffle some things. We had to shuffle some things around aggressively when we put the addition on the house.
I'm not really a codes guy. Like I think
Yeah.
I'm more of like
Neither am
a
I.
yeah, I'm kind of like how do we get this done without having to talk to anybody about anything? But fire code people are amazing. I have a
Hmm.
fire code person in my life, and I like that. It makes me feel safe. I used to, when we bought our first home, like we grew up in an apartment and then we got a home like when I
Hmm.
was a kid. The first thing I did when we ran into the home was I went and I got the bedroom with the tot finder sticker on the window. Do you know what I'm
Oh yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah. Oh, you had like the silhouette of the firefighter on it, didn't it? Isn't
Yes,
that right? Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And everyone was like, why is Connor so serious about this being his bedroom? It's clearly not the best bedroom. And I was like, because if this house catches on fire, somebody's coming to take me. So,
Wow, there you go.
yeah.
Screw the
So
rest of the people in the house. Just come get me.
I know, like after a while, my sister was like, I was a lot younger than you. That was kind of screwed up, And I was like,
Yeah.
well, hey, survival of the fittest. That's also the theme of the NFL this week as we talk about this was a restorative Sunday for me in the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock hour. We had gotten some absolute blank slates here. And you and I have talked about the way that prime time pilfers the schedule, but
Yep.
all of a sudden we have going on at the same time Vikings Lions at 1 o'clock, Texans Packers at 1 o'clock, and then a couple other 1 o'clock games that were highly consequential. And so we'll start digging into all those now. I thought it wasn't even close. I mean, I think that I thought that Vikings Lions was one of the best games of the year. And
Yep.
the reason why I thought it was one of the best games of the year, the Lions won 31-29, by the way. One of the reasons why I thought it was the best game of the year was because you got the best of everybody, right? There wasn't some bad call that blew this game. There wasn't some sort of controversy like a tipped pass. It was, you had hoped for the chess match between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores, and you got it. You had hoped for kind of that matchup of cojones between Kevin O'Connell and Dan Campbell, and you got it. I mean, Dan Campbell's running speed option punt fake on like in the first quarter of this game. It's like, hell yeah. I mean, this was great. It's what you wanted. And I couldn't have left more satisfied as just a fan with nothing at stake here.
Yeah, I think it was two teams that brought their best, and you don't always get that with games like this. Like
No.
they get built up this way, but it was two teams that brought their best. The Lions, I think the fake punt so early in the game kind of marked their approach to this one, which Dan Campbell's done that in the past, where he'll sort of set an early tone with a gamble. And like I think what I've learned about his gambles, some of them work, some of them don't, but I think all of them have a galvanizing effect with his team where it's like they have his back, and so he's going to make the gamble and bet on them. And then if the bet doesn't work out, then they're going to have his back on the back end. And I think falling behind 10-0 as quickly as they did, the fantastic run by Aaron Jones bouncing it outside. Then if you're the Lions, like that, the roof's coming off that place, right? And it is loud, and it is. I mean, this is the Vikings' chance to really stamp themselves now, as the favorite in the NFC North. And it was funny. I talked to Dan Campbell last night, and it reminded me so much of a conversation I had with him after they did the Matthew Stafford trade. And I remember asking him because he swore up and down. You remember what it was like then, right? Like
Oh yeah.
everyone thought Goff was just a salary dump, right?
Yep.
Like the Rams was just moving him, and maybe they got better picks in return because maybe the Lions got better picks in return because they were willing to take on Goff's contract, all that stuff. And obviously, Brad Holmes knew the GM there knew Goff from Los Angeles, but Dan Campbell didn't really have a personal relationship with him. And I remember asking him, like, what makes you really believe then, if this is true, that this isn't just a salary dump, that Goff can be the guy for you long term? And he said, and this I think was even before he played a game for him, the 2018 NFC title game. Dan was the assistant head coach of the Saints at the time, and Goff was the quarterback of the Rams. And Dan told me that was the loudest stadium he's ever been in. And the way that Goff kept his head about him in that environment with that defense, and that was a great Saints defense with guys like Lattimore and Jordan and Marcus Williams, all these guys in their prime, right? All these guys like the absolute height of their powers, Mario Davis, um, and like just how Goff calmly ripped the Saints' hearts out. And I thought of that story again because I think it was sort of the same quality, you know? And this is why I wrote this morning. I think you might have written the same thing as me. I'm not sure. That Goff should be in the MVP race. Like,
Yes.
I,
So that I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah.
Get off my website. No, I'm just kidding. I wrote a column after the game, saying that Jared Goff should absolutely be in the MVP conversation. You talked to Dan Campbell about this. I think it's a nice little package. People should
Yeah.
go on SI.com and they should,
Read Connor's and then read mine. I think that'd be a nice one too there.
yeah, get on there and get on there at SI.com and check it out. Um, my my thought process in writing that, not only so if Jared Goff again next week, Albert, has an 80% completion rate and a quarterback rating of 140 or better, it's the only quarterback in NFL history to have done that through four straight games. He was
Yep.
almost the only quarterback in NFL history through three straight games with a quarterback rating of 150 or more. I don't know how he
Wait,
missed it
just
in.
to give people context on that, by the way, a perfect rating is 158.3.
Right.
So,
So yeah, he's almost perfect in every single one of these games. And
yeah.
on Sunday, against the best defense in the NFL, Goff started the game. I forget what it was. It was like 16 of 16 or whatever it was, 10 of 10 against the blitz. And his first incomplete pass was batted down. And the one thing that blew my mind was, and it was something that I really hadn't seen all year, was the Lions were facing a 3rd and 9, and Flores's defense shows cover zero. So it looks like Goff's looking at a punt block,
Yeah.
basically. And time's winding down. The coach to player comms are shut off, and he goes to the center and he pushes everybody out of the backfield. He goes, "Okay, we're going empty. We're going empty." And he pushes everyone to empty. And all of a sudden, the Vikings defense is looking around like, "What do we do?" And so then they backed off into too high. Jared Goff got an easy completion, and I'll put easy in air quotes because there's no easy completions against this team, but just converted a 3rd and 9 against Brian Flores' defense like that. And it was the first time that you really saw them kind of have to put their sword away.
Hmm.
And I was like, Goff's doing this. Ben's awesome. His offensive corner. Ben Johnson's great. The
Yep.
team is great. But a lot of this is Jared too. And my only other point, and I'll kick it to you, is Jared had a bad throw in this game, right? He had a chance to deliver a knockout punch. He missed his guy long. And then what did they do? The Lions. They came back to him on the next drive. They went run, run, little check down to Jahmyr Gibbs. And then it's 1st and 10. And the Lions just need to get the ball close enough for a field goal. But what do they call? They call a hard throw. Like he had to hit Amon-Ra St. Brown
Yep.
as two defenders were closing in on him. And so that to me says all you need to know about Goff. He bounced back from a missed throw, and his very, very good coaches continue to put a lot of faith on him. They wouldn't have done that if he was just sort of this shell guy, or whatever it is, game manager, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I think like he is also lifting up the guys around him. Like he's got good players around him. Don't get me wrong. They built a really good team around him. He's probably playing behind the best offensive line in football. But this is an overwhelming skill talent, you know? I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very solid player. Is he a prototype number one? I don't think so. But he's a really, really good player. Khalif Raymond, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. I feel like it's a group that's more built on balance than overpowering you in any way. And that requires a quarterback who can go out there and play point guard and who can find the open man and who can operate the offense at such a high level. And I think like there's something to be said for the quarterback who in every game knows exactly what his team needs and gives it to them. And I think that's what Goff is. He goes into the game, he knows exactly what his team needs from him. And in this game, it's like all that stuff you just described, which is getting them in the right look against Brian Flores' defense, taking the pressure off of everybody else when they look on the other side of the ball and they don't know what's coming. And I would argue Flo's defense is probably the most difficult to prepare for in the NFL right now. And, the way that he's able to kind of lead the group, um, I think I thought was really, really impressive. And again, like I think he kind of typifies what they've become as a team. And I'm going to pull up what Dan said to me. He said, "It's what you don't see. It's what you can't see with your eyes. That's the most important thing for any player that's in this league that wants to be a player you can count on. That's what he's got in his brain and what he's got in his heart. The guy's a competitor. He doesn't get frazzled. He's tough. He's durable. That's what makes him dangerous. That's what makes him a winner. That's what makes him the type of guy that when the chips are down and things have not gone your way, he's going to find a way to move the ball for us and make a big throw and help us win. That's why I don't second guess or worry about it at all." He's that type of player. That's a rare trait in this league. When you've got talent and he's got talent, but it's the other thing. How many times have we seen quarterbacks and they've got all the gifts, but when you need them, they crumble. This guy doesn't. Again, like I think in every single spot, he gives the Lions exactly what they need. And like you can call that game manager if you want. I actually have come in as long as I've been covering the league to sort of see game manager as more of a compliment than a than an insult. Like I think a lot of people look at it and think it means that you're somebody who needs to be managed yourself when what you're actually doing is managing everything around you. And I
Right.
think Goff right now is as good as anybody in the NFL at it.
I couldn't have been, I can't agree more. I couldn't have come away more impressed. And, you know, additionally, this was a great performance. Let's not diminish what the Vikings did here too. I mean,
But
this Sam Darnold was 22 of 27.
I don't think less of the Vikings at all.
No, Aaron Jones was 14 carries for 93 yards. He busts that big one at the beginning of the game for the touchdown. And, you know, again, these teams I hope play 3 times this year because to me, that is the only way we're going to get a clear indication as to who is the best team. I thank God we get them again at the end of the season. And then, Albert, I'm not at all discounting the possibility that we see these guys again in the playoffs, and I would love that. I mean,
Well,
talk about a matchup that I wouldn't have been begging for like a
yeah.
year ago.
And then I think in this big round robin, the next one we got is I'm just looking at it now, Lions at Packers in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So
God,
I
that
mean
whole
that
division's gonna make the playoffs.
I mean the Bears are right there. The Bears are what, 4-2.
Yeah.
So I mean I think it's I mean I don't think I don't think anyone would have said that at the beginning of the year the best division in football is in the NFC. I think the best division in football right now is the NFC North.
Yeah, I don't think it's even close. Lo and behold, the Orr predictions. We have some
The
good things.
Oracle.
Yeah, the Oracle has some good moments. I'm on a Steelers heater right now, obviously. But we've had some bad moments. Pick the Vikings to go
Mhm.
7-10. They're literally almost there. They have to win one more game for the rest of the season. So I think they'll be okay. But I predicted the entire AFC North to make the playoffs, and
Yeah.
I don't think
Unlikely.
that's going to happen. Unlikely. We'll get to a little bit more of that later. Jets Steelers. I put this high up in the rundown.
Because you're excited to talk about it.
I'm excited to talk about it, but not for the reason I had a good conversation with our editors, Mitch Goldish and John Plume last night, just about, at what point Pittsburgh won, by the way, 37-15. Surprise. I don't think you're going to go back and watch this one. You shouldn't. But at some point, the whole Jets conversation just becomes this sleep cycle where it's like, all right, yeah, they're bad. They made a bunch of dumb decisions. They keep making a bunch of decisions, whatever. Your morning talk shows now are a competition between these people doing this performance art and saying how bad it is. And it is. It's bad,
Yeah.
right? They are now 2-5. They have the get right game against the Patriots next week, but then you're right back short rest against the Texans on Halloween. Good luck with that, kind of based on how everything's going right now. They would have to go on a kind of an unprecedented heater here to make the playoffs at this point. Like,
Yeah.
I think that the odds are grim. But I want to talk about the Steelers because, so here's what I wrote last night, Albert. I watched a team in the Jets that is
Mhm.
desperately trying to conform to their quarterback. And
Yep.
then I watched a team in the Steelers where the quarterback is desperately trying to conform to the team. And I have not seen Russell Wilson play like this in a long time. And I care less about the fact that, he threw some moon balls and everything looked great. I care more about the fact that, dude, he was throwing his body into the garbage compactor. Like
Yeah.
he played a tough game. And I'm not saying he's not a tough guy, but you and I both know this. We've both written this. In Denver, he did not want to play that kind of football. He wanted to
No.
play a career preservation style football and ride out into the sunset without any more of these massive injuries. But he played with kind of reckless abandon last night. He played Steelers football.
Yeah, and well, first of all, let's call this game what it was. It was a circus. I mean, we don't need to get into the hysteria like the shows that you're referencing do. But it did have that element to it where a lot of weird stuff happened. And I mean, let's call it what it was. Connor, in the first quarter, Russell Wilson didn't look like he could win the job at NC State. You know what I mean? Like he was dirting balls left and right, and it looked like, okay, like here's confirmation of why so many people in that Steelers building did not want the team going away from Justin Fields. And I think desperation can do something to a person. I think being in that spot where your career is on the line and your reputation's on the line can have an effect. And I think we were all under the impression that Russ was so tone deaf about so many of these things that it would never get through to him, and he still saw himself that way. But what we saw last night was a little bit of desperation, a little bit of okay. I understand that a lot of the things that I did in Seattle are what made me great. That's what made me the player I was.
Right.
And he had kind of gotten himself to this point where he thought at the end in Seattle, if you just play me like I'm Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, then I'm going to break all the records and go to the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to be legendary. And that was never his style of game. And sometimes a guy needs to fall flat on his face to figure that out.
Hmm.
And I think last year, as bad as things got between him and Sean Payton, I do think Sean Payton showed him the way on that a little bit. I think you saw some pieces of it last year before things went really sideways, where it was like, okay, it looks at least like he's a little more willing to be a part of the run game, to stick his nose in there, to make plays off schedule. Because this is never a guy who saw the field well over the middle. His height did affect him. He was never like the kind of guy who was going to keep all five guys alive in the route on every play. Like he was never who he envisioned himself being. And I think coming to the realization of that in Denver last year set the stage for last night. Now, is that sustainable where, you're going to be able to just throw the ball up to Pickens and George Pickens is going to come down with 5 catches for 111 yards and the defense isn't really going to adjust or do anything about it? I probably not, but it was good to see that version of Russell Wilson back. Um, and again, I don't know how sustainable it is. It'll be interesting to watch, but it did feel like that was the Russ that we saw before all these different things got in his head.
And I'm not allowed to claim
Closer to the Russ. He's not the athlete he was back then,
no,
but
no, no,
closer to the
no.
Russ.
I'm not allowed to claim clairvoyance here, Albert. I would guess if you turn the clock back to 2023, I was the
Hmm.
loudest proponent in the world for the Jets signing Aaron Rodgers, and in 2024, lambasted the Steelers for signing Russell Wilson, and it just goes to
Yeah.
show that sometimes we don't know squat. I
Yeah,
don't
and
know
I,
squat.
I I think like and look, like I think like part of this is like I mean Mike Tomlin, give him credit. He's right a lot. You don't make it 18 years as a head coach in one place if you're not right a lot.
That's why I'm well
And
compensated, he said yesterday when they asked
is
him
it, did
about
he
Russell
actually say
Wilson.
that? Did he
Yeah,
say
he
that?
he said that's why I'm well
I
compensated.
like it. I like it.
Ah,
But hey, he's got a right to puff his chest out.
for
Like
sure.
he went with his own feeling on it. He went with his own instinct on it, and he went against what a lot of people in that building wanted him to do. And I think he
Yep.
said that before the game to Jake Glazer, right? Look, I've been saying it for weeks. Like there are a lot of people who weren't happy with with the decision to go to Russ and wanted him to stick with Justin. And Justin is in so many different ways a Steeler, right? Like he plays like a Steeler. I think having Justin in the room probably put a little pressure on Russell to be a little bit more that way too.
Yeah.
And it's a good example of a head coach who's got a good sense for his team. And look, like here's the thing: if this does wind up being a flash in the pan, and Russell does look like he did in the first quarter, the next 3 weeks, they can just go back to Justin. It's no problem,
Right.
right?
It's not an
If
issue. Yeah.
if they had stuck with Justin, like I don't know if you can keep Russell on the roster. So I think what Mike Tomlin has done is taken his very good team and effectively given them 2 shots at getting quarterback right over the next 3 months, which is not a bad place to be if you don't have a franchise guy.
And then you compare that to the Jets, and there is no plan B, Albert. I mean, there's
Well,
no,
they've been furiously pulling those levers for the last 2 weeks.
I mean, my God,
I mean, the crazy thing is like how haphazard some of it's been, Like and again, like this is not like a hysterical point of view. Like I'm not getting into but like if you look back at it, like in the timeline of some of these things, they fire Sala, and I mean, God, if the instincts of the guys in that locker room didn't come true. Like what I heard that the players in that locker room were thinking and saying to amongst each other was, well, what exactly does this accomplish? The defense
right,
isn't the problem. You're firing the architect of the defense, and then you're taking a very good defensive coordinator and stretching him thin
right.
without like a guy on staff where you can point to and say, yes, that guy can take over the coordinator role.
Yeah,
So you've effectively like weakened your staff on the side of the ball that's the strength of your team. And you did something on offense that the guy who was head coach before was going to do anyway. And so What were you doing? Were you just pressing buttons? Was Woody Johnson just pressing buttons there because Robert Saleh wasn't his hire because he didn't have a relationship with Saleh because Saleh was hired by his brother Christopher in 2021? So you do that. And then my understanding is they didn't have a hard offer on the table for Devontae Adams until after Robert Saleh was fired. So now all of a sudden you're back in on Adams. And you push that one over the goal line right after the Monday night loss. The optics of that aren't great. Now, the framework for the deal was in place, but Joe Douglas made that call after they lost to the Bills to accept the terms of the deal. How do the optics of that look? Okay.
Terrible.
Yeah. You lose a game in London in embarrassing fashion, you fire your coach. You lose a game on Monday night with your interim coach in his first game, and you trade for the quarterback, one of the quarterback's best friends in football, and do something that he's been pushing for you to do for a month. What does that look like?
It's right. I mean, you are so far down this road, Albert, and I think now you can, if you're the Jets, you can turn around and you can say, "Oh my goodness, when has this ever been successful?" Right? I mean, this is a collection of mercenary players, right? I mean, you have a left tackle from the Cowboys, a right tackle from the Ravens. You have, a quarterback from the Packers. You have a receiver from the Chargers. You have a receiver from the Raiders. You have, and it's just I don't remember this ever working at this volume. And
Right.
now what you're starting
Like
to see,
I made the mistake comparing them to the Bucks. That was dumb. The Bucks had a lot of when Brady got there had a ton of infrastructure in place. Most of the
right,
talent there was homegrown.
right.
You know? It's not the same. Evans, Godwin. I mean, Tristan Wirfs was a rookie on that team. Ryan Jensen, I think, had been there for a year already or 2 years, right? On defense, like the Vita Vea, the Levante David. Winfield was a rookie on that team. They had a couple of corners and Davis and Dean that had been there for a couple of years. Like that team was homegrown. And they did added guys like Gronk, but and Antonio Brown, but those were ancillary pieces. Like the core of the team was in place.
Right. I mean, this is, boy, I don't know. And I think what's troubling me, and this is the only thing I'll say on this is like, Garrett has a big drop last night, and that leads to the interception. There are games where it seems like he's not playing at his best or the way that he was, and that he's not really being used in a position that is maximizing his talents. And so I'm wondering, like, at what point do you start to sacrifice, like, for example, like Sauce Gardner was becoming a vocal leader of this team.
Hmm.
And now you put him like 19th on the depth chart in terms of guys with a voice. You know what I mean? Because you just bring in all these other players who have been around. Garrett Wilson was an offensive rookie of the year. Um, he had the same average separation per route run as Devontae Adams during Devontae Adams' last season with Aaron Rodgers.
Hmm.
He's getting open, but when you put a guy like that with Aaron Rodgers, you have to get open on Aaron's terms and you have to get open the way that Aaron wants you to get open. And so, at what point are we sacrificing the great players that we thought were the building blocks of this thing? That's my
Right.
concern, right? Is, where do these guys get left off? And is it going to be like an old Jets team where, all of a sudden, great players are walking out the door? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, it feels like the window is very, very small. The path to real contention is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And, um, right now, I think I mean, like in so many different ways, it's become Aaron's operation. I think to some degree, you've neutered the front office, you've gotten rid of the head coach. Like again, like you said, you've kind of taken the young stars that you were building around your Quentin Williams, your Sauce Gardner, your Garrett Wilson, you get Brees Hall, like guys that you were really going to count on, Oliveira Tucker as leaders of the future of your team. You've kind of taken them out of positions of power. it's a weird situation, and that team's got weird makeup. And I don't know. I mean, they'll beat the Patriots next week, but that Texans game on Halloween, it's another national TV game, and with a panicky owner, I mean, like I don't know what comes after that.
Right. I
That's
mean,
still
what do
in
you
front of that's still in front of the trade deadline too. So who the hell knows, you know?
right, like what do you do now? I mean, I mean you can't. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was nice. You give the Steelers their credit at this
Yep.
point. I mean, the Jets are what they are.
And
Like
Russ too.
there.
Russ too. Russ played well.
Yep. Sorry about all that stuff I said, Russ. Anyway. Hey guys, it's that time of year again. Football's back, and it's here to stay until February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. You can win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player's stats, like touchdowns, passing yards, and more. I know a lot of times when you go to these apps, a lot of this stuff seems like a foreign language to you. I remember the first time that I went to a kiosk at a horse racing event. What am I doing here? I had to grab someone to try to help me explain it. This is straightforward, and signing up, guys, is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple to use mobile app or underdogfantasy.com. Sign up with promo code MMQB, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code MMQB to claim your new customer special of a free pick and a deposit offer. Some rules here, guys. You must be 18 and older, 19 and up in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and up in Colorado for some games, 21 and up in Massachusetts and Arizona, and you must be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text next step to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778 Hope NY or text Hope NY to 467-369.
Can I give you my
Uh
take on this next one? We're going to go Chiefs Niners here.
yeah, I want to hear what you have to say about the Chiefs Niners. Give me your take.
The Chiefs are the Patriots.
Okay. Hold on. Let's give people the score here. The Chiefs won this game. The
Yep.
Chiefs, the Patriots slash Chiefs. The Chiefs won this game, and it was 28-18. Important context here. I mean, Brock Purdy threw 3 picks. The Brandon Ayuk lost for the season in the middle of this game. Deebo Samuel starts the game, has an illness, exits the game. The 49ers were gutted, and sure, the Chiefs have had injury issues all along, but it just doesn't seem to matter, to your point, Albert.
Yeah, so like let me ask you, how much do you know about Chris Roland Wallace?
Hold on, let me open up my scouting binder here. Nothing.
How
Nothing.
about Jaden Hicks?
Nothing.
Okay, so that's the first place where I say they're the Patriots. How many times would you watch the Patriots over the 20 years where Tom Brady was there, where somebody you had never heard of suddenly makes a play?
Right?
You know, and that player would never become a truly great player, but in that moment, he was exactly what they needed him to be, right? So that's number one. Number two, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kareem Hunt, McCole Hardman. Like that is Patriots as it gets. Like
They're the
you have a
Danny Amendola.
yeah,
Who are some other great Patriots
you
henchmen?
have a player, no, but you have a player in your system, right? And he's great. And then he gets rewarded off the production he had in your system somewhere else. And then he falls into disuse in that other place. And then he comes back and all of a sudden he's productive again. Right? It's like the
Magic.
Dion Branch corollary there, right?
Yeah.
Like where, and I love Dion, and Dion was a great player, but he was never the same in Seattle as he was in New England. Seattle winds up dumping him, trading him back to New England, and all of a sudden he's like an integral part of an MVP season for Brady.
Right.
So there's that, like where they have found a way to they have found a way to like just continue to have like this almost shadow roster of guys around the league that they can bring back when they need to bring them back and that can play big roles because they know those players better than anybody else. And then there's the way they're playing defense now and the way that they can win without having premier skill talent on offense and how they can morph into whatever they need to be on a week to week basis. And I mean, I really hope they can keep that young defensive group together. You know, your Trent McDuffie's, your Nick Bolton's,
Leo
um,
Chenal.
yeah, Leo Chenal. Obviously, Chris Jones is in a different category age wise. He might be the defensive player of the year. George Karlaftis, like they've just gotten so many things, so many picks right. And so like now they've got this defense that's capable of winning on its own. And Mahomes didn't even have to play great yesterday, you know? But he gives you enough, which is another Brady hallmark. Like even on his bad days, like he'll summon something at the end to win the game. I mean, it's just like in every single way. It's like almost like the Brady legacy, the Patriot legacy, the Belichick legacy. That baton has just been handed over to Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid. I like it's eerie to me how similar they are.
You know why else they're the Chiefs, Albert?
Why else?
Because the rules are set up in a way that continuously benefit them. And I'm glad that, now that, Matt, our resident Chiefs expert, is not hosting the show this week, that we can finally shed some light on the fact, Albert, that any other quarterback goes scrambling down that sideline and then yanks the ball over the head of anyone else, gets blasted into the Gatorade cooler,
Oh,
and never does it again. But everybody else was terrified to touch him, and he uses that against them to
yeah.
scramble and to rip off the biggest play of the game. I'm going to
Well,
extrapolate
they're
this.
also like those fakes were so ridiculous. Like, I mean, I tweeted this, but it's like there's also that like that fake would work for 0.0% of everybody else, right? But like when it's Mahomes, it's like it's almost like for every one of these guys, it's like, what the hell is he doing? It's like, you know what I mean? Like those fakes would not work for anybody else. But it's like, but with Mahomes, there's that element of what the hell could happen next, so it works.
You know what this I'm extrapolating this, right? Did you watch the he was in the whatever the luxury suite for the Royals Yankees game. Did you
Yeah,
see that?
he's a part owner of the Royals.
Oh, he's a part owner. Okay.
Yeah,
So he's in the
yeah,
owner's suite. But one of his teammates was a Yankees fan.
yep.
Did you see this? And he got up and he started shaking the guy like after the Royals had
I think
scored.
I saw that. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So if you're that teammate, like you could tell the teammate was all right, all right, buddy, okay, and Mahomes is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like there's probably something that he wanted to do, but like you can't touch him. He's the most important player. He's like part owner of the goddamn Royals, but also like the most important player on the team. And
the
so
most
you just have
important person in the history of Kansas City.
possibly,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna Google that in a second. But so what
There's got to be somebody who was on like the Oregon Trail or something that's more important than Mahomes, right?
you can't like whether it's subconsciously or not, you are operating under the
I have no
guise
idea
that
if the
like
Oregon Trail goes through Kansas City, by the way. My only knowledge of Oregon Trail is from the video game in the 80s.
and we've all died of dysentery.
Yep.
But the
Wow, I'm impressed you know that. Like that would have been like I think that game was out when like before you were born.
Oh no, I played that thing on a floppy disk,
That
man.
game was great.
Crushed me some Oregon Trail. But it's like it would be like if the CEO of our parent company and came to hang out with us and we were playing pickup basketball and like dunked on me and was like, yeah, like what am I gonna do? Push him? Get up and push him? You know?
Right.
No, can't do that. Although I did random segue. I used to play with my friends in a league with they worked in finance, right? And
Yep.
so they rented out a nice gym, and then I would
Yep.
go and play pickup with them. And like the CFO of the company came,
Mhm.
and the guy's driving down the lane like Mahomes the other day. Like everyone's just like not going to touch him. I got
Yeah.
in there and I put him on his backside because I was like, who cares? Like, no free buckets. But
Yep.
everyone was astonished because I'm like, I don't care. I don't work for this guy. You know,
Yep.
no,
Um,
that's my point.
are you worried about the Niners?
No, It's weird to say that, to keep saying that, right? It's like, I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about them. But we'll see what we get from Ricky Pearsall. He had his first catch.
Yeah.
He'll start getting into it. Brandon Ayuk's out, but Christian McCaffrey comes back, what, by week 10? And all of a sudden, they completely change a complexion as a team again?
Yeah, it just feels like all the injury luck they've had the last couple of years is crashing down on them now. You
For
know what I
sure.
mean? So, I mean, and look, like they still have like that core of McCaffrey if he's healthy, if he's McCaffrey again, Trent Williams, George Kittle, Trent Williams, who reacts to losing the way my fourth grader does. We're working on that. And then and like Debo and yeah, I mean, there's enough good players there where they should be able to figure this out. And I mean, I think they should be the clear favorite in the NFC West still.
Sorry to Patrick Mahomes, but Walt Disney is from Kansas City. So I would say, you know,
Yeah,
also the rapper Tech Nine, who I know you're a big fan of, Albert,
huge fan of Tech Nine. It's my guy.
Don Cheadle, Ed Asner, Charlie Parker, the musician. So, you know,
I think Walt Disney wins that one.
Walt Disney's slightly
Sorry,
more
Pat.
famous than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Texans and the Packers. Another fun game, but for me, the thing that I walk away from, Packers won 24-22, by the way, is the Jordan Love experience is starting to develop a little bit of a roller coaster ebb and flow
Yep.
to it. Like he is slinging it, but there are
Hmm.
times when you're just like, "Whoa, baby! Like, what are you doing there?" And
Yep.
he's backing up deep into the end zone on some of these throws and some of these drops. And if it wasn't for that defense, which is excellent right
Hmm.
now, full of some of the Packers defense now reminds me of what the Chiefs defense was maybe like a year ago. Like they're
Yep.
building into this team full of versatile role players who tackle really well in space. Evan Williams is like, I've written about this guy every single week for the
Yeah.
last 3 weeks. He's made a big play in every single one of these games. If it wasn't for that, we're talking about Green Bay like kind of being if you lose that game, you're what, 4-3, and you're
Yeah.
not really in a great spot. But all of a sudden, yeah, they're one of the best players, one of the best teams in the NFL
Well, I
because
think
of that defense.
Jeff Halfley's done a great job in maximizing the guys there. I mean, to hold CJ Stroud under, I think it was under 90 yards. Was he at like 83 or something, right? Something like that,
Yeah,
passing for a game. And I know they don't have Nico Collins, but it's still a really good offense. Yes, they gave up some stuff on the ground, but I'm with you. I think the Packers defense is ascending fast. Um, Here's what I like about Jordan Love. And I talked with him after the game last night, and I think like what's cool about like what you're seeing from Jordan Love is like that in the biggest moments he is making the throws and he has more command than he has in the past. And I think you see a few throws every game that no one else could make. And to me, like the Tucker Kraft throw, in the was that first quarter, second quarter?
I think it was in the first quarter.
Right. The one that was like just fit between, and it was a little bit of a scary throw, but he fit it between the safety and the linebacker, and Kraft
Second
laid
quarter,
out to
sorry.
catch it. Right.
Very beginning
And
of the second
then,
quarter.
and then the command and the Wicks touchdown throw, where that wasn't a lateral, but to rush to the line and to be able to gather the team and then throw the touchdown down the sideline to Wicks. And then two throws, I think, on the 2 minute drive to win the game. One to Wicks underneath to convert third and two, and then just the absolute rope to Dobbs on the slant. Um, they're giving him more right now. They're giving him more as far as like protections. He has the ability to call plays in 2 minutes. Now he didn't yesterday, but they've given him the power to do that. I think you're seeing him evolve and test himself a little bit more as a quarterback, which ultimately I think Connor will get them to the place they want to go with him.
So long as you're
But
winning the games, it doesn't
yeah,
matter,
and
right?
I think
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that there's a process with a quarterback that's that uber talented is like, the first, and I think LaFleur has been really, and this is why again I think LaFleur, it's crazy he hasn't won Coach of the Year. He's done such a good job in his 6 years there, but there's, I think like last year there was like there were definitely reins on him. You know what I mean? Like, and then we saw them start to loosen the reins, and you started to see it towards the end of the year. And how he played at Dallas was out of this world in the playoffs, and played pretty well against the Packers or against the Niners until the pick at the very end. And you know, I think you're seeing what you're seeing is like, all right, like we want him to test his boundaries a little bit. And we want to like take advantage a little bit more of like the kind of player he can be when he's off script. And I just think it's like the natural evolution of him as a quarterback. And they're good enough around him now where if he throws a couple picks, it's not the end of the world. And he did throw two picks yesterday. So I just see this team now where it's sort of like even like last year that was this way where they stumbled this time of year, but it was kind of in the name of team development. If you remember, they were
Yeah.
like 2-4, I think, at one point, and they stumbled a little bit this part of the year, but it was with this bigger vision in mind. And I think that's sort of what's happening now, where they're good enough in the run game with Josh Jacobs. They're good enough with the defense where, like, hey, like, let's try some things out. Let's test things. Let's let our young group grow. And the cool thing is, like, all those guys, like, are coming up together, like Love, Wicks, Reed, Watson, Dobbs. I know Musgrave's out now, but him before he got hurt, now Tucker Kraft. Like, all those guys are kind of coming up together. And I think it's got a chance to look pretty cool in a month or two. But I think they're going through that process. And the fact that you're able to beat a good Texans team while that's ongoing is pretty impressive.
As for the Texans, you look at this game and you say, okay, you start out with a lead, you get the lead back in the second quarter. At one point you're leading by as much as
Mm,
five against this team. But and you don't turn the ball over. You win time of possession. This should be one of those games that you'd love to have back. It was interesting to see CJ Stroud look really uncomfortable. I mean, a
yeah.
22 total quarterback rating, 86 yards passing. Despite getting 115 yards from Joe Mixon, your leading receiver was Dalton Schultz with one catch for 28 yards. Stephon Diggs had five catches for 23 yards. Um, it just looked a little bit like, okay, the Packers defense had their number. And
Yeah.
what's cool about that is, everybody everybody kind of said before this year, we need to figure out a situation where the Texans can evolve this offense, right? It's
Yeah.
a Shanahan offense. It needs to evolve. I think this is probably one of those games where it's like, okay, we're going to see some growth out of
Hmm.
this. We're going to see them diversify out of this because they have to.
Right. I agree. And I think the magic of Kyle and Sean and Matt and Mike, the guys who are kind of like the OGs, the guys who are in Washington, is that they do evolve it, and that it does look different than it did. And San Francisco and Los Angeles, his versions of it are different than Green Bay's version of it. The Green Bay version evolved into Rodgers, now has gone back to doing some of the things it was doing before with Love. And I think it goes without saying what Mike McDaniel has been able to accomplish with Tua when he's been healthy in Miami. And that's the challenge on Bobby Sloak is to keep evolving it. And it's an interesting conversation to have too, because I can remember talking to Vikings people after they beat the Texans. And one thing that came up was how they felt like they were able to challenge the Texans in ways that they hadn't been challenged before. And it was interesting because one person I talked to said, like, I think this is actually going to be good for Houston because this is going to force them to change and force them to evolve and force them to push the ball forward. And, I think that's coming for the Texans. Again, they were right in this. They had every chance to win the game. If they managed the clock a little bit differently there at the end, maybe the Packers don't have the chance to come back the way they did, right? Um, I just think like that right now that's sort of where they're at. They're in this process of having to evolve what they're doing, at least on offense, and that can be a little bumpy. You go from last year when nobody had any tape on what Bobby Slowick's going to do, nobody had any tape on what CJ Stroud is as a player, to now teams being able to build a book up on you, and yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of sort of part of the process of where they are. And their defense played well. Their defense is fine yesterday. I mean, their defense, I would say, I don't know, how do you feel about it, Connor? But like, I think their defense did enough to win the game,
No doubt. I
you
mean,
know?
I think they're right there. And
Yeah.
with Houston in particular, it feels like there's, I don't want to say less of a sense of urgency because you're not
Is the division?
You're not in the Packers division. And
Yeah.
so right now you're 5-2. You have the Colts, you have the Jets, and you have the Lions
Yeah.
coming up. And so it's like, these are big games. But you know, if you win half of them, you're still probably going to be okay. And then starting after Thanksgiving, you have the Titans, the Jaguars, and the Dolphins, and then you close the season again with the Titans, who, quite honestly, might be the worst team in the NFL. I don't, I, you know, that they are hard to watch.
Yeah.
Um, you know, take that for what you will, right? Take that all
Yeah.
into consideration. I mean,
Hmm.
this is kind of how that's kind of how I see it. Let's go just quickly. I mean, so we have the Bengals and Browns, and we have to talk about this because it was reported during the show. Watson did rupture his ACL. He's out for the season. He should be back for week one next year.
Yeah.
But right, like, do you want him back for week one next year?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's the weird thing about this, Connor, is that okay, so you have 92 million fully guaranteed to reckon with over the next 2 years. That's not including this year. And 172.77 million in cap charges left after this year. That's a mountain of problems. And I think that that's why the Browns were resolved to try and get this right this year and try to work it out this year and ride it out with Deshaun Watson this year because they were resigned to the fact that Watson was going to be their quarterback next year. And they figured if we keep playing him and Ken Dorsey keeps growing the offense and we get a little healthier on the offensive line and the line adjusts to not having Bill Callahan anymore, eventually we'll be able to get to a point where maybe this Watson thing becomes manageable or even good going into 2025. That's all gone now. Now, the information that you have going into March when these decisions are made, March and April, um, is the information you got now. And so, what does the information you got now tell you? The information you have now tells you that Deshaun Watson is an anchor for the team, and he's weighing the team down in so many different ways. And you're probably going to have a top five pick. And I think right now the play is to draft a quarterback in the first round
that's what
and
I
let
was just about to
let
ask
him
you.
compete with Deshaun Watson. I think it's probably going to be. And what sucks about it is you hate to pigeonhole yourself into a single year where you have to do that because there's not always a quarterback that's going to be worth it for you to take that high. But if I'm Andrew Barry, Glenn Cook, Cat Raish, all the people that are in charge of scouting there, I am going to be I'm going to be piling up a lot of frequent flyer miles over the next month and a half to go see Shador Sanders live, to go see Quinn Ewers live, to go see Carson Beck live, to go see Jackson Dart live. It's the only way out. Like, because you can't spend to go get a veteran when you've got that financial anchor weighing you down from a cash and cap standpoint. So it's sort of similar to where the Broncos are right now with Russell Wilson. It's a more intense, a way more intense version of it. But like the Broncos drafted Bo Nix in the first round, they essentially do not have the advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie contract for the next 2 years, this year and next year, because of the residue of the Wilson contract.
Right.
So, like, I think what you do is because you're going to owe him the money anyway. It's not like Wilson, where eventually you're going to get a break financially if you get rid of him early. I think you keep Watson on the roster next year, and you take a quarterback in the top five, and you let that kid compete against Deshaun Watson and let the best man win in 2025. And I know we're looking way ahead, but it feels like the Brown season is over.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way. I mean, unless in DTR got hurt in this game, Jameis Winston came in. I mean, unless Jameis leads them on a miraculous run at this point, Nick
Which
Chubb
would
came
be a
back.
hilarious result if Jameis Winston plays them out of position to draft a quarterback.
You know what? Most of the time, and having covered the Jets for a long time, and grown up a Browns fan, I'm I'm sensitive to that idea of, oh, like everyone always says this about us, and it's hard to overcome that narrative. This is, brother, this is a hole that they made for themselves. And
You
this
know
is
what's
going to
crazy
be,
about it too is they've got that group has gotten so many other things right,
yes, but it's gonna,
and it doesn't matter.
this is gonna be deeper and darker, Albert, than I would guess any self-inflicted wound that any other team has put on themselves in modern times. I mean, and you're seeing it now. I mean, you're seeing what happened last night where all these players are put in a position where they got to defend Deshaun, they got to spurn the fan base. I mean, yeah, should you cheer for a guy that ruptured his ACL? No. I mean, that's not how we should behave as people. But
No,
is this fan
but
base?
but I mean, the fan base has been through a lot. In defense of those people, it's
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a release probably at that point. I mean, they wanted him benched for a long time. I'm not defending these fans, but at the same time, it's like,
I mean, the the
what are we
team,
doing here?
the team. I mean, let's call it what it is. The team asked them to take a leap morally in the name of improving the football team. That's what this was, right? Like when they traded for Deshaun, it was how can we get into that club in the AFC that Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Houston now, like that group of teams, the Chargers, group of teams is in. Because we don't feel like we're quite there with Baker. So how do we get behind the velvet rope? And this was what they felt like they had to do to get behind the velvet rope. And they asked their fan base to sort of suspend what they might think about Deshaun Watson off the field to in pursuit of that. And I can understand if you're a Browns fan where that like you would feel so frustrated by all of this, you know?
Yeah,
You'd feel so frustrated by all of this. Um, I don't know. Like I always, I thought about this with the Saquon thing too. Like, I don't care if someone burns his jersey. Like, really, what difference is that going to make? You know what I mean? Like, I don't care about that. It's like that. Like, look, like that's why the game's so popular, right? Like, it's because you have fans that are that locked in and that passionate. That's what our audience is, you know. And I used to like get more upset about these things. Like, if someone burns someone's jersey, like everybody's going to wake up. The sun's going to rise tomorrow. You know what I
right.
mean? If someone gets booed, like that's not a great look. But in the end, like it's you're asking for that level of engagement from people. You're asking for that level of engagement from your fans that they're going to buy your jersey and they're going to spend money on tickets and they're going to battle 3 hours of traffic to get to your games and they're going to stay locked in March and April to follow you in the off season and they're going to buy whatever you're endorsing. Like if you're asking for that level of engagement, this is the flip side of it.
Right. I mean, and you just, what do you there's like this level of disconnect between the fans now and the team that I would guess is probably so much greater than it was before. And I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield would have figured it out.
Right.
I'm not saying that, whatever, but
He'd be better
it's
than this, though.
at some point, if you kept going on this cycle and you had done a good job building the rest of the team, you would have hit on one of these guys. And
Yeah.
maybe they would have had the third, the second pick, and they would have gotten Jaden Daniels or Drake May. You know what I mean? And it would have, at some point, like all these teams eventually do get their
To
guy, and the job is to keep the rest of the roster capable for that moment when it hits,
right. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's again, like it's just like this group of Browns, like I think you can legitimately say like this group, right? So the core, if you wanted to identify the core, would be Amari Cooper before he was traded, Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward. He could throw Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in there, Jack Conklin, Jed Wills, David Njoku, like that core of players has legitimately had their chance at being a real contender over an extended period of time, submarined by this one move.
Right.
I don't think I'm overstating that.
No, and they deserve it. I mean, they have to carry that. They do.
Yep.
I mean, and they have to carry it for a long time. Meanwhile, I don't know, man. Bengals,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
they're in it, you know? I
so they're
mean,
going to be, I think they're going to be 5-4 going into Baltimore for a Thursday night game in November. And that's going to be such an interesting one because that's going to be okay. The Bengals are back. And if you remember, that's the game that Burrow got hurt in last year. And that was when Burrow really started to hit his stride last year. And so there'll be a lot of interesting storylines going into that one. If the Bengals can win the next two games, which are very winnable, they should be 5-4 going into Baltimore.
they're very winnable, but I'll knock this one game back out of the lightning round just so we can talk about it very quickly.
Yes.
Was they have the Eagles next week, and now the Eagles absolutely put one on the Giants
Yep.
at MetLife Stadium. This was a disaster scenario for the Giants because Saquon Barkley looked amazing. Daniel Jones got sacked 100 times, and it's one of those deflating fan losses that I can't believe we're back in this space. Now, I am a hold the line on Dable guy. I still think he's the best coach that they've had since Tom Coughlin. I think that people are tired of hearing me say that. And I agree, I understand I understand all that.
Uh,
Um, but I think this was more about the Eagles sort of freeing the beast,
yep.
Nick Sirianni coming out with an absolute just, after last week, there was so much strange, which I loved, but I think a lot of people didn't love. He had to apologize for behavior, all that kind of stuff. And then you just come back and you obliterate a division rival. They're in a different space now. And Jalen Hurts doesn't look awesome. This offense still looks very plodding and very clunky, but still, once a game, you're getting these massive knockout blow shots to A.J. Brown. It's still working. So I don't know. I mean, do the Bengals want to play this team or not? I don't know. I don't know what version of the
The
Eagles is
Bengals
going to
should be
show
able.
up.
I think the Bengals should be able to beat them. Like
Yeah,
I do. I just view the Bengals as a better team right now.
yeah.
But I will say this, like about Barkley, like it's interesting how that went to from like looking like a luxury signing to now him being like the entire offense is built around him. Like, and
Right.
they are relying on him, and he needs to be a star on a week to week basis. And he's been really, really good for them, no question. And I'm sure that felt great for him yesterday. Uh, and the defense has started to play better, you know. And I think like the glimmer of hope you have if you're an Eagles fan right now is some of the young pieces on defense are starting to play really well. And your Quinion Mitchells, your Cooper DeJeans, like that's sort of what they've been missing the last couple of years. And the fact that they've got that injection of youth, and I think age was a big problem for them on defense, and like their team speed on defense was not very good the last couple of years. It looks like that the defense is kind of getting back to where it needs to be. And of course, they've got a veteran defensive coordinator pushing the buttons too, which helps.
Meanwhile, with the Giants, you pull Daniel Jones finally. But it's a weird thing, right? Where you pull him after a couple weeks where he's actually playing pretty well,
Yeah.
and then you're looking for a spark from Drew Lock, but clearly Daniel Jones is pissed off about it, said as much after the game. And I don't know, I just feel like it scuttled this momentum that had been building. I mean, God, if they had a field goal kicker, I mean, this whole season would be different, Albert. And it's just it's
I,
crazy how we've gotten to this point, you know?
I wonder what it would have looked like if they had pulled off the trade for Drake May.
I'm not even talking about let's go back to not even being able to because the Patriots weren't right. I mean, the Patriots weren't going to do that, right?
Right.
So let's go back and let's say that okay, the Giants lose that first game to Minnesota 28-6. Everybody loses that game to Minnesota. No one was had a beat on Brian Flores at that point. Okay, let's say they win the next week in Washington because they did not have a field goal kicker for that game, right? They did
Right.
not have one. So they lost by a field goal. Okay. Let's say they win that game. They're 1-1, 2-1 after a win to the Browns. Then that Dallas game, another one that came down to a one score game.
Winnable, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like even then you're 2-2, 3-2 if you beat Seattle, 4-2 if you have a field goal kicker again against the Bengals. And it's like, man, like this season could be so different. And I don't feel like this team is that far away. And yet nights, afternoons like Sunday, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what are you doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I
That
mean,
we
I just like, it's, I don't know what this is going to look like in a month, and I
That's the
just think,
thing.
I remember like, and I love Dayball and I think he's the right guy. And I think the way that Dayball and Joe Shane have built that thing up, there are good players there now. They're obviously missing some key parts, that they're going to need. But I just, I think they just got to be. I think they just have to show improvement over the next couple of months. That's all. Because I can remember like in 2021, the Maras did not want to fire Joe Judge, and then that press conference happened and everything changed. So I don't think Dayball is bulletproof right now. I think that they need to show well the rest of the year.
All right, let's head into the lightning round. Seahawks 34, Falcons 14. Seahawks are now 4-3. The Falcons are 4-3. Uh, Geno Smith looked phenomenal in this game. A great showing, I think, for the Seahawks offense, where I think Ryan Grubb finally got into a rhythm as a play
Yep.
caller and picked apart this Raheem Morris defense that just it needs pieces. It does. They're 23rd in the league right now in terms of EPA per play allowed. And even when you get a good game out of Bijan, you get him moving, you get him at full speed. It's not enough because that Seahawks offense is just too powerful.
Yep, stuck taped together right now, on defense for the Falcons, and that's why I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move for a pass rusher, another one, even after trading for Matthew Judon. They just don't have enough on that side of the ball, and I don't think the offense is fine, um, but I don't think like you're gonna get the version of Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts that you envision consistently enough, and you see these flashes, and it's like, oh, well, there it is. And that's just not really who those guys are.
Jaguars 32, Patriots 16 in a game that Albert, I'm guessing no one will remember in terms of like its impact on world history. But Gerard Mayo certainly stepped in it after this one, and I'm guessing you're hearing a lot about this on talk radio this morning.
Yeah, the calling your team soft was interesting, especially like coming 3 weeks after. I think he said something along the lines of like, "There's no question about our toughness." Um, I don't
Whoops.
know. The messaging seems weird here. The receiver room is very involved in social media. I'll say that. There's been lots of activity on Instagram out of the receiver room. This just feels like a mess right now. I the defense was supposed to be the strength. I'd argue the defensive coaching might be worse than the offensive coaching right now. It just does not look like a very well run outfit. The silver lining is Drake may look like their best player against the Jaguars. And I'd say like the same thing for Trevor Lawrence. Like my main takeaway from that game is at least those two teams have quarterbacks that it looks like you can build around. I thought Trevor played really, really well also. And it's a reminder that either Trevor Lawrence is the guy who saves Doug Peterson in Jacksonville, because I think he's actually played relatively well this year on balance, or he becomes a very, very attractive carrot to go and chase the next head coach with.
Titans and Bills 34-10. Those 34 points were unanswered,
Yeah.
by the way. The Titans actually led this game 10-0 at one
Yep.
point, and
Yeah.
I watched almost the entirety of this game, and I don't know why. It's one of those things that you just can't kind of remove yourself from at some point. Um,
I don't know if I'd
there,
agree with you on that.
there was a series of plays where the Titans were unable to scheme their running back open on check down passes out of the backfield. And I was like, everything about this looks impossible for them.
Yeah.
It really does. Meanwhile, the Bills get Amari Cooper drops his first pass, then catches a touchdown, then has a nice winner in man coverage. You can tell that I think that this is becoming a nice little bonus for guys like Keon Coleman, who had a
Yep.
monster game. So if you're Buffalo, it's like, yeah, man, we did what we had to do at the trade deadline. Uh, Ain't nobody touching us right now in terms of, anything else in the division. And so life is good, right?
I think Buffalo could wind up in the Super Bowl. Like they've just got like enough good young players who I think will be better in 2 months than they are right now. You mentioned Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook. Like on offense, I think that they're going to continue getting better. They got one of the best players in the sport at quarterback. And then the defense is like again like relying on young players who should keep ascending. So I mean it's so interesting because like they went into that Monday night game at risk of like falling into a tie with the Jets in the division, and now they're 2.5 games up on the Dolphins, 3 games up on the Jets, and it effectively looks like the AFC East race is over.
Indianapolis 16, Miami 10. During the preseason, Kirk Herbstreit talked about a world where Joe Flacco supplants Anthony Richardson, and the guy got absolutely run out of the booth for saying that on social media. And I don't know, man. Anthony Richardson, 10 of 24, 129 yards, a 24.3 quarterback rating, and then
Hmm.
14 carries in which he is not protecting himself. Like this
Yep.
is it just can't go on like this. And yet
And this is the conundrum, though. Like
God
that's
bless
the
Shane Steichen.
problem.
They're winning games. I don't know how. I don't know how they're 4-3 right now.
That's the problem is this guy who's got like injury history going all the way back to high school cannot win if you don't play him that way. And maybe he eventually evolves into something more than that, but he cannot win if you don't use him that way as a runner. And I just think it's got to be a frustrating thing for Jonathan Taylor and for Alec Pierce and for Josh Downs and for Michael Pittman and all the guys that they have there on offense because they got to see the other side of it, right? And I just don't know. It's just a weird circumstance to be in because it's like what's best for your franchise for in the long term, right? But players don't care about the long term. Players care about right now. And I think what's clear is for right now, I'm not like overstating it to say Joe Flacco is the best option right now, right?
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Um,
like, I think the best option for right now, and the players I'm sure can see this, is for Joe Flacco to be the quarterback.
Raiders Rams, another hoot that was for some reason
Hoot.
on in the Orr house, 20-15. The Rams get a big win.
Well, there are only three 4 o'clock games, so I can excuse you for that one.
Right. The Rams get a big win here, and you wonder if they can just hang around a little bit longer until everyone gets healthy. Meanwhile, the
Hmm.
Raiders, you lose Aiden O'Connell, he broke his thumb. Gardner Minshew throws 3 picks, loses a fumble, and Antonio Pierce kicks twice inside his own 10-yard line in the final couple minutes of the game, and then doesn't use any of his timeouts before the 2-minute warning to stop the Rams and just gets the ball back at the end of the game with absolutely no chance of coming back and winning this one. So, say something nice about the Raiders. Brock Bowers is a stud.
Yep.
He's awesome, and I will give Las Vegas should not be in any of these games. I think we have our fun at Antonio Pierce's expense. However, I mean, they had what, 10 combined starts from their 5 wide receivers yesterday. I
It's a
mean,
really bad
yikes.
team.
Yeah, it's a bad team. It's an awful team. And Tom Brady, when he's ready, is going to come and fix it. So,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Rams look like this week against the Vikings too. Because I mean, like it feels like
do
they're
they get
sort
up
of.
for that game? Possibly, right?
I mean, and it's Kevin O'Connell going back and playing against Sean McVay, and McVay knows O'Connell really well, right? Like, and those defensive coaches were with O'Connell. So, can the Rams throw a little bit of a curveball in a short week with Minnesota taking a long trip? I mean, I think it's just an interesting one where I think the Rams have a chance this week to really save their season, get Cooper Kupp back, get a little bit healthier across the board. The Rams are mildly interesting again.
Make the Rams mildly interesting again. And last but not least, we have the Panthers and Commanders. At this point, it's like, okay, it's 40-7. put Bryce Young back in
I
for
think
the
you called, I think
goddamn
you,
game.
I think you called, I think I heard you call the Titans the worst team in the league, which, I would have an argument for you I would have an argument on that one.
Just put Bryce Young back in. Like what? How, it can't get worse. It can't get worse.
They've fallen behind by 17 or more points in the first half of four of their first seven games.
Ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just
What's the owner's next move?
I don't know because he already nuked the team, and then you're like, yeah, let's get rid of Brian Burns, you know,
Brian
and
Burns,
just
DJ
replace him with
Moore,
Jadeveon
Christian
Clowney. Let's get him
McCaffrey.
DJ Moore. We don't
Yeah.
need any of these guys. You know, it's embarrassing.
The funny thing is like Moore, McCaffrey, and Burns were all like it's not like these guys were like 29 and like on the back end of their prime. These guys were like the heart of the prime of their careers.
Yeah, it's not good. Anyway, that's our Sunday in
And then they
review.
take all the pick, then they take all the picks they acquired and trade them for Bryce Young.
Amazing.
Love the
That's our
hey, give the Commanders credit though. I mean, like to be able to keep going and keep playing the style that they play with Mariota coming in for Dan. I mean, I Dan Quinn's doing an awesome job. I think he's the coach of the year right now.
there is some there's a I think there's a lot of guys jostling at the top. Certainly Dan Quinn is among them. Cliff Kingsbury, an assistant of the year, possible head coaching
Yep.
candidate at this point again. So the world, time is a flat circle.